Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Sima Irfina. I'm here to tell you about the history and development of the word journalism. But before I start it, I want to ask you, did you know about the history and development of word journalism before? If you don't know, you must stay in this video. Okay, in the early days of the journalism, it can be seen from various literatures on the history of journalism. That is always refers to acta diurna in ancient Roman times during the reign of Emperor Julius Caesar. Acta diurna, namely a bulletin board, a type of wall magazine or information board now, believed to be the first journalistic product, the press, mass media, or the world's first daily newspaper. Julius Caesar is also known as the father of the world press. The development of journalism in the world is related to the others. We have 4 countries of the world. First, in North America, the development of the press follows the unique history of British colonization on its colonial plains. Colonial North America retains journalism as a news-seeking activity, while on British soil, Oxford Gazette was born. Second is in Europe. Journalism first developed in ancient Rome during the reign of Julius Caesar with evidence of the signing of acta diurna, which means bulletin boards. Journalism in Europe grew rapidly after the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg. Third is China, also has a big share in the development of world journalism. As we know, paper was first made by China. With the invention of this paper, journalism that was once considered to be among the upper classes because of its writing media in silk, wood, and other expensive materials, has developed rapidly. Last is Indonesia, has a long history of journalism. This is due to difference in leadership and times experienced by the Indonesian nation. As we know, Indonesia was colonized by Japan and Netherlands. This has an effect on the use of language in journalism. During the Netherlands colonial era, generally using Dutch. During the Japan colonial period, the development of journalism was very limited. Okay, that's it. History and development of world journalism. Let's we move to development history of journalism in Indonesia.
After a global view of global journalism, we will discuss the history of journalism in Indonesia. According to its history, the Indonesian world of journalism is divided into 3 epochs. 1. Colonial journalism, built at the 8th century Dutch, marked by the evidence of a Dutch newspaper called Batavia's New Village. Next, China's journalistics. Journalists in Indonesia have published a newspaper as a medium connections and unifying Indonesian Chinas. The last, national journalism, what is made by native Indonesian children as the struggle and tools of independence movement of the 20th century. The emergence was marked by the presence of journalists named Priai, by Tirto Hadibama, or what is more known as Raden Yokomono. When looking at the history of journalism in Indonesia based on its development, we will see that Indonesian journalism is divided into 6 periods. 1. During the Dutch occupations. The history of journalism in Indonesia began when the Netherlands invaded Indonesia. Journalistic during the Dutch occupations market and release of the newspaper memorized their novellas in 1615 by the Governor-General of Presence Jan Pieterszoon John. It was originally handwritten until 1988. The Dutch Indian government has had a printing press sent from the Netherlands and was finally able to produce a newspaper with its first printed copy. The connections of these first printed newspapers included provisions and agreements made between the Netherlands and the Sultan Makassar at the time. Later, the developments of the world of journalistic and newspapers in Indonesia at the time climbed to the levels of about 30 Dutch newspapers, 27 Indonesian newspapers, and 1 Japanese newspaper in the mid-19th century. During the Japanese occupations, after Indonesia's occupation have been changed by the Japanese occupations, the world of Indonesian journalists had undergone a massive change in which all newspapers were forced to merge into one and their contents in accordance with Japan's plans and objective in the Daitoa Senso, or War of Great East Asia. Freedoms of the press when severely restricted and was of course pressured to follow the interests of the Japanese government at the time. The next is post-independence or governments of President Sukarno. However, after Indonesia's increased trade with the liquidations of the Republic of Indonesia and recognitions of its sovereignty as a united republic based on UUD, and role of journalistic was falling. Instead, newspapers began to be used as political maneuvers amid the shakings when even opponents against them in order to gain power in the new Indonesian government. As journalistic and press conditions in Indonesia deteriorated, October 1, 1958 was considered the date of release in Indonesia, with more and more newspapers being shut down and journalists arrested. What is more, President Sukarno issued a presidential decree on July 5, 1959, which further narrowed the missions and freedoms of press in our country. The next, during President Suharto reigns, it also called the age of liberal democracy that affect freedoms of a press and the word journalism in Indonesia, where everyone, while having capital, is allowed to publish a newspapers or a magazines without any legal sanctions. But for these reasons, every newspapers and magazine ran a contest to publish a large volume of papers by moderately ruling out the quality of the media at the time. There is also a new problems with the emergence of free media contents of pornography because of the lack of restrictions on it. As conditions deteriorated, as has been the case with the ongoing wars of Pena and Shoulder, government have made journalists police in order to fit the stage Pancasila at the 1945 bill. In this case, the word of following journalistic is expected to be together with governments to build national purse for the best and healthier. The last period of reformations. The development of journalists at the time of the reformations was marked with freedoms of the purse that allowed newspapers and magazines to go on without renewed permissions because the should had been abolished. Indonesian journalism is growing rapidly and can encompass societies because all levels of it create mass media. This is seen in the growing web of journalists, both print, electronic, digital, and internet. Hence, news increasingly separate so that people in rural area are able to find out what is happening in city and vice versa.
Mass media international structure. The organizational structure of the mass media is divided into four main sections led by a general leader or PU, namely editors, marketing department or business department, administration or office, technology or equipment. Thus, the media management level has the following general top management structure: general leader, editor-in-chief, business leader, head of office. First, the editor's department. The editorial division is led by the head of the division, namely the chief editor. Editor-in-chief is the commander-in-chief of journalists. He is in charge of the editorial range. The editor-in-chief is responsible for the performance of the editor in the news process, which consists of news planning, news gathering, news writing, news editing, and news publishing. The full position is the editorial department is as follows: editor-in-chief, managing editor, editors and preprint editors, coverage coordinator, reporter and photographer, proofreader, and webmaster or web designer later. One managing editor is the technical executor of the editor-in-chief and is the editor coordinator, such as opinion editor, city news editor, sports news editor, and economic news editor, and so on. Marketing department. This is the looking for money part. The marketing section is led by the head of the division, namely the marketing manager. And then office. This is part of the office or secretariat affairs. It can be chaired by the personnel and general manager. It could also be the head of the secretariat. And then technology or equipment. This is part of the production equipment, like a computer equipment, electronic media, radio and television is led by a technical manager who handles broadcast equipment, from transmitters, antennas to microphones.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Alika Pramesti and I'm going to explain this material. Here it is. In terms of form and management, journalism is divided into three major sections: print media journalism, or newspaper and magazine journalism; auditive electronic media journalism, or radio broadcast and journalism; journalism, audiovisual media, or television journalism. Print media journalism includes daily newspaper journalism, weekly newspaper journalism, tabloid journalism, daily, weekly tabloid journalism, and magazine journalism. Media journalism, auditive electronic, is broadcast radio journalism. Journalistic code of ethics plays a very important role in the world of press, where as the guidelines for the values of the journalism profession, so that the journalistic codes of ethics must be understood and implemented by journalistic. Code of ethics deals with behavior and moral values. Violation of the code of ethics will be subject to legal sanction applied. Commonly with the journalistic codes of ethics and implementing it as a journalistic professional form, and by running journalistic activities in accordance with the journalistic code of ethics means a journalist has responsible for themselves and society. Implementation of Journalistic Code of Ethics is an order from Law Number 40 of 1999, Article 7, Paragraph 2 concerning the press, which reads, journalists have and obey the journalistic codes of ethics. Journalistic code of ethics plays a very important role in the world of the press, where as a guideline for the values of the journalism profession, so that the journalistic code of ethics is mandatory, understood, and implemented by journalists. Therefore, journalists must comply with the Code of Ethics Journalism approved by the Press Council. Thank you.